What's your name and or your alias?
My name is Sean Cole. I go by Doctorboss on the socials.
I know you are a record producer, an educator. You've taught music production, and you dabble in podcasts these days. So when people, if I met you in an elevator for the first time, how would you describe what you do?
It's always hard because I have always, because of my curiosity for all things audio, I've always worked on all the things. I mean, I owned a recording studio and I loved engineering and then producing records. But I also, there's a car driving by. I'm sorry about that. I also, oh, perfect. I shouldn't have brought it up. I also have designed studios from acoustic standpoints. I've done live sound. I've done live audio installations. I've now worked on VR and video and cartoons and all sorts of things. So when I'm on an airplane, way back in the great before, and someone says, "What do you do?" I usually just say I work with sound.
It's a good answer. I think I might start saying that too. I might start saying I'm Dr. Boss and I work with sound. See how that goes for me.
Yeah.
You ready for the lightning round?
Oh, yeah.
What's the best song of all time?
At Last, Etta James.
Maybe this answers question number 2. Who has the best voice of all time?
Oh, darn it. I don't think it's Etta James.
No offense, Etta.
Yeah.
Or we could just say, what's one of the best voices of all time?
Yeah, I would have to say.
Welcome back, Etta.
You're in.
Who's the best musical group or band of all time?
Measurably the Beatles, I guess. But the best is a hard thing to define.
Why would you say that they're the best?
I think they showed the most natural evolution in their musical expression, and they grabbed the world by the hand from bubblegum pop into psychedelic experiments and helped open, I mean, they're a product of their time too, but the breadth of you could say that, Coldplay has been around for a long time and AC/DC has survived decades and all that stuff, but they've all just done what they do. Whereas the Beatles started by doing what everyone else did really extraordinarily well, and then helped everyone see that there were different creative ways to make music.
What's
and
your
album
dream?
Sales.
Sorry.
That's okay.
What's your dream collaboration?
Well, today it's Wilco. I listened to Yankee Hotel Foxtrot yesterday after a long
Great
time
album.
away. And I thought, man, I wish I could have been there for that. And I wish that they could make another album like that.
Good choice.
Thanks.
Laptop or recording studio?
Yes.
Great answer. What's your favorite audio effect?
The Roland RE201 behind you. Space Echo.
Right there. Why?
Because it's predictable and unpredictable. It does a thing called delay with a spring reverb if you want, but the physical medium that's inside of it and how often you clean the tape heads and how long the tape has existed will give you its own character I mean, I love delay, but that's the kind of delay that I yearn.
I agree. What's your favorite plugin?
I use the Universal Audio Fairchild 670 on lead vocals all the time. Like I have for a decade now, it feels like. But Soothe 2 has knocked my socks off recently. Not replacing the Fairchild, but as a new innovative way to look at how EQ and dynamics can be handled. It's blown my mind.
Well, then, have you met my favorite plugin of all time, Golfos? Same
No.
type of idea.
Yeah.
It tames the bad stuff, but it also brings up the underrepresented stuff to equal flat in real time. It's amazing. I just put it on the mix bus. I couldn't live without it anymore.
I've heard about it, but it's funny, the description you just gave is really what a producer should be. A person who tames the bad stuff.
Yes, but it does it in real time.
Real time.
All we can do is set the best setting at a static level, unless we're going to ride our EQs with automation. And now that I'm saying that, it's not a bad idea, but that's a lot of work.
I know.
This does it in real time.
Pre-production's important.
What is a song that sounds great?
I'll have to default to my soundcheck song that I think you probably know, the Witness dub by Roots Manuva. I've used it as I've had a number of different songs that have come and gone as my like room calibration music, but that one has been consistent from the day that I heard it first. I love dub music, and the British engineers with the thickness and beautiful control on the bottom end, all the way through all the effects and the stereo goodness, means that I don't know what a room or a set of speakers sounds like until I play that song. I think it helps. It just showcases every frequency beautifully.
That's so cool. Shout out Roots Manuva.
Shout out.
All right, let's go way back in time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe not too far back in time, depending on your relative position in time. Where are you located now, and where are you originally from?
I am currently located in a picturesque town called Mahone Bay in Nova Scotia. My wife has told me that it reminds her of a town called Sleepy Hollow, I think, from a show called The Gilmore Girls, which I've never watched. And that's why we moved here. Well, it is a nice town. After living in the Vancouver area for the 20 years prior. So I was in Vancouver for about 13 years, and then the scenic Bowen Island, a 20-minute ferry ride away for 7, and then was chased all the way to the East Coast in search of secured housing.
Good plan.
Thanks.
And where were you born originally?
I was born in a tiny town called Sackville, New Brunswick. Actually, I was born in Toronto, and it's like one of those things that really bothers me. My mom was pregnant. She was on her own. She had a sister in Ontario, and she went to visit her while she's pregnant with me, and ended up, giving birth to me in Toronto, and then went back to Sackville. It was really just a visit, but now I have to live with that on my birth certificate my whole life.
I thought you would have liked that.
Hell no. Have you been to Ontario? Like, it
just
smells bad and the people are mean. Like, I don't know.
I went to Toronto once after thinking that would be the case my whole life, and I loved it. I thought it was amazing. Shout out Toronto.
Yeah. Lots of people there that I love. And there are good parts. I realized that you could get on the lake, and that would be a nice way to enjoy it from a distance.
Right. Okay, so
how's it going so far, Fletch?
This is
Doing
great.
okay.
Yeah.
Feeling good.
I love this. Yeah. I love you and I love this. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm feeling good.
Awesome.
Just wanted to check in,
We know each other, everybody. How did you come up with the name Doctorboss? Who came up with that?
The very first band I produced, I was an engineer in a recording studio that was owned by a composer, and he had decided he wanted it to be a commercial studio, but he didn't like working with bands, so he found me to be the in-house engineer. It was in his parents' basement, and then eventually in a house his parents bought for him in Kerrisdale, but that was great. So for about 3 years, I was the engineer there, the only engineer. People would respond to the ad in the classified section of the Georgia Strait and come in, and I would have to deal with whoever came in and just be the engineer, which was great. And I thought I could focus on nothing more than engineering and everything would be awesome. And eventually I realized that it didn't matter how well I could place mics in front of things and capture sounds, that I would need to be a producer if I wanted to make great records. So a band that I had mixed live, who I really liked, they were a porno funk band called Slow Nerve Action. They came to the studio, and in 2 days we recorded and mixed, I think, like a 12-song album on a tape-based system, so it was mostly live with some overdubs. And I was mixing it. It was, the end of day 2. I'm mixing, it was insane to do that much in 2 days. But as I'm mixing, I'm trying to work out delay times to throw to delay machines, and I picked up I had a Boss Dr. Beat in the studio with me, which was a little metronome machine made by Boss. And you could tap it. It would tell you the BPMs. It would tell you also the delay times to go for. So I would constantly be tapping it.
Cool.
It would give me the quarter note delays. I would pop that into the Yamaha O2R that we were using. And all the while the band is cheering me on, and they were calling each other Boss. And when I pulled out the Boss Dr. Beat, the singer said, "Dr. Boss!" And then I ended up going on tour with them. They're great friends of mine, but they called me Dr. Boss that whole time. And it stuck. I think some crusty professional audio person from Greenhouse at that point in my career said, "You should have a nickname for when you're mixing." And which kind of made sense to me, because I recorded the record, I produced the record, I mixed the record. Do you want it just to be recorded by Sean Cole, mixed by Sean Cole? So I started saying mixed by Dr. Boss. And when I was mixing something, I would give Dr. Boss the credit. Everything else was Sean Cole.
That's really cool.
Dr. Boss stuck.
That's great. I love that.
Shout out Boss Dr. Beat.
Tell us about an early musical memory.
How early? We're going way, way back?
Yeah, what's one of the first, musical discoveries or memories you have?
I'm old, so my parents were playing 70s and 80s music for all of my childhood. I think what stands out is when I realized that I had a portable stereo ghetto blaster thing that had a cassette deck that could record. And so I could record myself. It had a little mic on it, and I would record myself doing radio plays, essentially. I was grade 6, I think, at the time.
So cool.
And it was super fun because you get one shot, and I would bring a bunch of stuff from the house to try to do sound effects and things while I'm doing it. And that evolved into remixing with a tape deck. So my first summer job, I bought a big bad stereo system with a dual cassette deck separate from the receiver and the CD player. And I had a Heavy D cassette single that I had scored from the record shop, and those cassette singles were a thing. So it had like 6 different remixes on it, because you weren't paying for the cassette just for one song. They would fill it up with all these remixes. And I didn't love the remixes, but the breakdown on the remixes was super cool. So I took the original song and recorded that up to the breakdown. And then, it's like I'm pause on this tape, play on that tape, record, pause over here or whatever. And then I would rewind or fast forward it to the breakdown for each and every remix. I'd hit go, wait until the breakdown came, unpause the record deck and record the breakdown, and then pause, cue it up again, go to the next breakdown version, remix version, and created a song that was the normal song, except the breakdown happened like 6 times in a row with all the different remixed versions of the breakdown, because I thought it was so cool. And that was my first remixing experience, I guess. And it made me super curious about, because it was my first time being exposed to reinterpreting a song so many different ways, which wasn't something I'd thought about.
And song structure too, right? You're thinking about bars and beats and sequence.
Yeah.
Did you know that early hip hop producers and DJs were doing a similar thing in New York? I don't know, maybe 10 years before that or 5 years before. I don't know when you were doing that, but you just did it naturally.
Yeah.
I love that. So cool.
And that's inspired me to do more in that realm. And at grade, I think I was still in 8th grade, I started DJing like the high school dances.
Wow. That's really cool. Were you that kid with the headphones that said, here, listen to this? Were you like the DJ for your group?
Yes and no. I was all about pop music. I wasn't discovering new, weird, obscure music. I was just a 100% pop guy. So,
wow.
And that, if you're DJing high school dances, you got to play what the people want. And that was my first exposure. And I did that from grade 8 all the way through grade 12. Got a radio show at the university campus radio in my town. I lied and told them I went to the university. So I started that when I was in grade 11. I'm just like, hey, can I get a show? And I got Saturday nights because all the university kids, nobody wanted to do Saturday nights. But with a buddy of mine, Darren Gilmore, I did Saturday nights for, I think it was 2 years, where we would do an all request extravaganza, and we hustled and called every floor of every residence in the entire university on the phone to promote it. And it became the pre-party all request pop, dance radio show for all the university students. So I was 100% all about pop at that point.
That's so cool. Not Darren Gilmore from Watchdog Management, right?
No, see, that's a weird one.
Shout out to
Watchdog.
Both Darren Gilmores and Watchdog. How did that experience influence you as a producer? Like you're early out of the gate, knowing what people want and keeping the crowd happy.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because I went from, so in grade 12, I'm still doing the high school dances, DJing at the radio station. And at Christmas time, I remember, and I was only 16 at this point, but I was doing the radio show, and the manager of the campus pub at the university campus pub, which is the only place with a dance floor in town, basically, was the pub's in the same building as the campus radio station. I'm in the attic doing the radio show. The student pub is in the basement. And I popped down there to see if we could get in, of course. And, it was Christmas. The students were gone. Most of the students, it was maybe New Year's Eve. So I'm having to run up 4 flights of stairs to change the song every few minutes, because it's pretty chill. And the manager was like, I've been looking for a DJ who plays more than just like Spirit of the West and the Tragically Hip. How about you DJ at the club? And so that's what I did. And I went to that university. So for 7 years, I was the DJ at the club.
Wow.
And when I went to school for audio engineering record production, I stopped DJing at that point, like 100% stopped, and switched to the recording side. And somewhere along that line too, I became less enamored with pop music and more interested in interesting music. Well, weird music, how about? So that by the time, and I don't know, you know how it is when you at a recording school, you can't be like, I love only pop music. Pop music is the best. Like, everyone's super cool and they have great taste in music, very different styles. So I didn't take that passion for pop from my DJ years and turn it into working on pop music on the professional side in recording and producing bands. I took the sensibilities of that. I've fought forever with bands when I'm producing. I've been fighting to I can't even tell you how many bands I've taught what a chorus is. Like, prog rock band that I got, and I'm like, hey guys, this part that you play right here that's super catchy and really cool, what if, just stay with me, what if you played that a second time in the song? And then maybe one more time at the end. And I don't know, maybe we'll call it a chorus. And they're just like, okay, we'll try it. I don't know. It's not my favorite part of the song, but yeah. So the pop influence certainly informed the choices as I struggled with CBC bands to try to convince them to play music that was more accessible to humanity.
I think that's part of the fun of being a music producer is tricking the artist into making it more commercially viable, because that's not a discussion that most artists want to have. So just don't have it with them and just do it. Like Butch Vig, hey, let's just do that vocal again. You're not doubling my vocal, are you? No, I didn't keep that one. Let's just do it again. And then you hear the mixes and you got the double vocal and everybody, it's too late. The world loves it.
Yeah.
Love it. Do you remember the first album that you bought with your own money, like when you were a kid? Or even not with your own money, but the first album you went out and purchased?
I'm not sure if it was me or not. They were mine, but like some 80s stuff, including Styx and Mr. Mister were up there. But then I jumped on the Columbia House vinyl bandwagon. And and the pretty early ones that really blew me away were soundtracks, to be honest. It was the Stand By Me soundtrack, the La Bamba soundtrack, and the Good Morning Vietnam soundtrack. Those were the first that I was super into.
Because they were kind of greatest hits records.
Yeah.
Right?
And hearing especially Stand By Me and Good Morning Vietnam, there's so much amazing Motown in there. And Stand By Me was more the older 50s pop, but the Motown stuff that I heard in Good Morning Vietnam definitely blew me away. I have a hard time getting away from Motown. It's just like, if I just want to feel good, I just put Motown.
I'm with you. And I heard it a bit growing up, but I missed it and I didn't get into it until whoa.
Oh, this is going to be on the outtakes. That was Motown just dropping the mic. That was a mic drop moment.
Does my mic still work?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Robust. The Shure MV7, ladies and gentlemen.
If you're looking for a mic,
versatile USB mic, a dynamic USB mic that also has an XLR output, so you can treat it nice in your own audio interface. As you can tell, there's some handling noise.
Oh yeah, is there?
Well, just from you screwing it in. Getting that C-clamp on there.
All right, sorry about that, people. A little bit about microphones. I missed Motown the first time through, really, but I got into it when I was after I got into music production, and now I feel the same way. If I just want to hear something that is uplifting and awesome, and my favorite thing about it is the levels are all wrong. It sounds like it's mixed by a 3-year-old in the best way. Like the tambourine is 10 dB louder than the vocals. The vocals are mostly clipping sometimes. Like I just imagine the engineer just smoking a cigarette and somebody's going, should we fix that? And I'm going, it'll be fine. And I think part of it was on purpose and part of it wasn't. I watched a documentary on YouTube done by Reverb, the eBay of the music business, about how to create the Motown sound. And the beginning part of it, it talks about how Berry Gordy worked at an assembly line in Detroit and started making the music in the same way that he saw the assembly line working for the cars. And I just saw that last week and I just went.
They would track 2 songs a day, sometimes 3 songs a day, top to bottom. And then isn't that the studio where they nailed the drums to the floor? They're like, that's where the drums go.
Right, that's the drum sound. It's like drum sound. Check it off the list, yeah. Right?
Yeah.
That's so cool. I love that so much. Okay, so let's talk about some of your early influences. So you're buying those soundtracks. What was the first? Do you play any instruments? What do you play?
I think I play them all poorly.
It's good answer.
I played piano the most growing up. Had a keyboard. That was an early moment for me when I realized that I could plug my cheap Yamaha keyboard into my stereo, hand-me-down stereo, that I could, like, RCA can go into RCA. And so then all of a sudden, I think it was grade 5 that I did that. I had in my room, it's like I'm playing my keyboard out of the big speakers of the stereo.
I remember doing that with an electric guitar. We just plugged it into the mic input of the stereo and blew the speaker.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I'm like, headphones as mic? Like, what if I plug this in the mic thing instead of the headphone thing? Hello?
So cool.
I played drums. I tried bass for a while. At this point, and I was in choirs and musical theater when I was growing up.
Cool.
At this point, most of what I play on a record would be hand percussion, because the first time I recorded a drummer playing the shaker, I had to edit it. It took me 4 hours to edit the performance, and then I was like, maybe I should learn how to play the shaker so that I never have to do this again. And that was a good idea. And it's funny because you brought up the tambourine. That's one of the things I love. I mean, I play tambourine on stuff, and hand percussion is my jam. So the song that I could have answered with greatest song of all time would be Stevie Wonder's Signed, Sealed, and Delivered. I'm Yours, because it has the best tambourine part in the history of tambourine.
I love it. That's so
starting in verse 2.
I often answer the same way you did with, I play all the instruments, none of them well. And I got that from Brian Eno. Like, that's what he says. I'm not, I don't really play anything well, but I'm not really afraid to play anything. And I thought, that's what I'm going to do too, because, like when you plunk out an idea on a piano, you say to your artist, hey, why don't you sit at the piano and try and hammer out some melody? And they go, oh, I don't play the piano. It's like, well, neither do I, but watch this. If I press my fingers on the keys, it makes sound. And then don't play the ones that are bad sounding, play the ones that are good sounding. You know, it's like, it's not really, you don't have to have like a certificate to play an instrument.
Oh, yeah.
So what were some of your first musical...
And with MIDI, like, for crying out loud, just
MIDI,
ham fist something into the computer and then you can figure it out. It's
totally. You can separate all the notes later. What were some of your first musical influences?
Well, I should probably say singing in choir was a musical influence, and then furthering that into musical theater. So,
but like artists that shaped your style, that would be musical theater. Wow, cool.
Well, it's the cheesiest and poppiest of all music, really.
That's where you got that pop stuff sensibility from.
Yeah, musical influences. That's hard because I feel like I love bluegrass, I love funk and soul, I love dub music, I love indie rock, I love, and have all the while. And I mean, I had a period where I was listening to jam bands a lot, like Fish and pre-sewage dump Dave Matthews Band and that kind of thing. So, but I can't say that they influenced me necessarily. I think I was more influenced by the stuff early on. Like when I got the Stand By Me soundtrack, I went down a rabbit hole of all of 50s pop. Like I just went for it. I loved 50s pop for a solid year. And then I went through a 80s hair metal phase, right after that, which is ridiculous. And I guess I've always been I've been influenced by, I never had a huge record collection, but I always lived with people who did. So I was always absorbing their perspectives on music too.
That's awesome. Do you remember the moment when you realized that you were going to get into music production, you were going to start producing other people? Because that's kind of a big deal, right?
Oh, I remember it.
Let's hear about it.
Well, like I said, I was DJing. And I don't know if you noticed, but I said I DJ'd at that university for 7 years. Most people don't go to university for 7 years unless they're becoming a doctor, not Doctorboss. So I wasn't exactly doing well in that university. And I went for 2 years and then took a year off, but DJ'd and worked at the bar that whole time in the same town. Went back for a year studying. I started in math, physics, computer science, engineering. By the time I had taken a year off and gone back, I was trying like geology, information systems, Spanish. Like I was doing whatever. I'm just like, I don't know, anything. Is anything cool? And that didn't work. So then yet another year where I was just living in the town and hanging out with all my university friends, but not going to university and working at the bar, DJing and bartending. And I went on a vacation with the girlfriend I had at the time to Margarita Island, Venezuela, to hunt down someone who I had hung out with who lived in that town the year prior, but then he disappeared. This is pre-internet, basically, so I had an old home address in Venezuela. I'm like, I'm going to see if I can find it. And I did. Like, I went to the address from the student directory phone book in Venezuela, and I knocked on the door, and the door opens, and an older lady says hello, and I said, is Christian here? She said, yes, just a second. And out comes my old friend Christian, who I hadn't seen in quite some time, and we had hung out on one of my previous years off, partying mostly, and I really loved him. And he had decided to leave university, like I did, to pursue his passion, though, and he was in the middle of studying architecture, and brought me into, like, what I had interrupted him doing when I knocked on that door. Was he had a big drafting table, and he was designing like a beautiful, spectacular beachside restaurant resort, and it was just like, oh my God, this is amazing. I went back to my resort and was floating in the pool, like back float, looking up at the sun, and I thought to myself, I had an epiphany. Maybe I could go to school for something to do with audio. Like, why am I trying to learn geology, which I'm not that into? I mean, it's interesting, don't get me wrong, studying rocks, but
Shout out geology.
Shout out geology. I had a serious epiphany. It was just like, ding, maybe there's a school that teaches audio stuff. And, I flew back home, and the internet kind of worked at that point, and I, whatever it was, Netscape searched, or Alta Vista or whatever, audio recording schools, and it turns out they did have them. They did exist, and there was one I, could choose between Vancouver, Toronto, or Montreal, and I decided to go to Vancouver because it was the nicest city in my mind.
Shout out Toronto again.
I was trying to just skip that part. So I went to school at that point, and everything changed because all of a sudden I was learning what I was truly passionate about, and it went really well, and never looked back.
That's so cool. Great story. I love it. It seemed like I've heard that before. I
was wearing a different shirt at that point.
I got a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
What is music production?
It's a lot of things. Maybe in the most general sense, it's the art of translating a musical idea into a auditory experience.
Love it. Do you remember? Can you hear that sound? Okay, good. Can you remember the first demo you recorded?
Those little things in?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Well,
that's
I think
good.
so.
Keeps us honest.
I just don't like this, the sun, where the sun is right now. But
no, I think it's good. It's focusing on the gold chains. I think it's good.
Wood, but
oh no, it's sparkly. First demo I ever recorded.
Yeah. Do you remember like the first, demo?
Yeah, when I was a student, when I'd gone to recording school, it seemed like I was the only one there who was only interested in engineering. Like, everyone else was, maybe they're a musician and they want to figure out how to record themselves, but they weren't like, I want to be an engineer in a studio, or they were, well, that was it for most of them. They were musicians who wanted to do better at what they were doing, which meant when we had all the free studio time, they all wanted to be on that side of the glass, and I wanted to be in the room. So everyone was allocated a certain amount of studio time. There's about 10 of us, or probably more like 5 of us, who got together and pooled all of our studio time, and they all were performing, and then I got to have all that engineering experience, which was amazing. So in that process, they put a band together, and I recorded some demos for them in there, and then the real thing. I did another memorable demo after that was at a band's house that I had worked with, and I had to bring like a Mackie console, and I think I brought a DAT machine and set up all the mics, and it was like, 24-track console that I set up in the kitchen. Everything's coming to the console and going to a 2-track DAT machine to record the demo.
Shout out 16-bit.
Shout out. I never used a 8-track. like one of those the classic
ADAT?
old. No, I too many ADATs in my life. like an old 4-track or whatever, the cassette ones, the Fostex and that kind of thing. I remember a few times people bringing them into the studio like, hey, and I'm just like, I don't know how that works, man. That doesn't make any sense to me.
They were pretty complicated because they had so many overlapping functions, that you'd have to press a lot of buttons just to bus stuff over.
Yeah.
Tell us about the first time you walked into a recording studio, like a real one. Real nice one.
Oh, the first time. That's really hard to pinpoint.
Or one of the first times.
Yeah, it's probably I had done after working at the first studio that I worked at as an engineer, when I decided to pursue production after building that studio for a couple steak dinners, working there for 4 years, I'm like, hey, I want to produce bands now. I'm going to bring bands in to produce. Is that cool? And they're like, yeah, you just have to pay what the bands pay. And I'm just like, wait a minute. I built this place. I've worked here for like food and $50 a day tops for 4 years. Now I got to pay what everyone else pays. So I quit and started recording people in my house. And
cool.
One of the first records that I did in my house, the artist had a connection to someone at the warehouse studio. And that meant that we could get it mixed at the warehouse.
Cool.
So the first time walking into that place blew my mind. Like, it was and is a mecca of all things recording, except for the sound of the live room. But maybe we shouldn't go down that hole. But it's a beautiful space. The mic collection is, top notch. It seems like a very fancy Starbucks with all the lounges and stuff.
Yeah,
very impressive.
The vintage brick that they had to remove, and the really nice walls and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
In your music production career, what are you best known for?
Best known for, according to me.
Yeah, I think so.
I would think the thing that I've experienced the most is working on early records with bands, typically like full bands, and helping them get signed. So doing the first album, and then they get picked up from that, and then I don't get hired again. I mean, sometimes I did, but often, especially when they're young and impressionable, then once they get the record deal, and the label will say, okay, now you're going to go work with this super fancy person in LA or whatever. So I experienced that a lot of times, where I worked hard on the demo or the first EP or the first record and helped them find their voice, and then it got the attention that they wanted. And then I don't excel at the schmoozing and business side of things, so often that would translate into like, oh, see you guys, good luck.
I think that happens a lot. I think that's kind of a natural progression, and I was that guy too, although I had friends like you that it happened to a lot more, and more like, heartbreaking fashion. And then I realized that those are the albums I like the best. I like those albums the best. The first album where they're finding themselves, and when the band scales, although they can be really great albums, those aren't my favorite ones. My favorite ones are the dirty early ones.
Absolutely. Me too. There's a band, and I don't know how I got this gig, but I did a full record demo for a band from East Van called Pride Tiger, and they were just amazing, chock full of raw rock and roll energy, and that was one that I basically just engineered. Like I didn't do any pre-production. I was just tapped to like, hey, we need someone to record these guys for the label submission or whatever. And so I did it, and no pre-production makes me feel like I didn't produce it. It was more like I engineered it, I captured it, I mixed it. It sounded awesome and so raw and full of emotion. And they got signed, and they went to LA, and they worked with a big name producer doing those same songs. So this was a rare one where, because normally if I get it all the way to a record and they get signed, then the next thing that happens is another record or another thing. But this was where I did, like, it was a demo record. So what they did with the fancy LA guy was the same songs again. And I wasn't pissed or anything. I wasn't angry. I was excited to hear what was going to happen. I'm like, oh, sweet. Now this is a great perspective for me. I know exactly where the songs are with the band. And now they're going to go get the LA treatment. And I have to say, I was shocked because the fancy record ended up being like not much had changed. They didn't, like, to my ear at least, it didn't sound like the producer did any work with them on fleshing out any ideas. They like added some tambourines in parts. They basically just re-recorded it the way that I had done it, or the way that they had done it. I don't want to take credit for how the demo was recorded necessarily, structurally, song structure, but it didn't. It was like the same songs done the same way, maybe a flashier solo here or two, here and there, or fancy tambourine parts. But it didn't sound, it lacked that raw emotion of the demos too. And it didn't, unfortunately, they didn't really have, even though it was a super major label, it was a really big deal. It didn't really go anywhere, unfortunately.
That's what I like, is the rawness of the emotion and the takes. Mm-hmm. I love that more than something that sounds finished or full or any of those words. I love the raw human emotion.
But then it's tragic because we teach people to hyper edit, to, make sure every kick and snare and hi-hat is exactly on the grid. And so often in doing that, we lose any bit of emotion that's there. I mean, you and I both, Motown resonates with us. Mm-hmm. They're not playing to a click. They're not singing in tune. They're not, like, there's so much more than that. And yet, especially at recording schools, people are typically taught, like, oh, make a record, this is what you do. You record everything, you put it in the box, you make sure it's all gridded, you edit everything to be perfect, you tune it, and then it sounds great. But it's like,
and that that is a great method. I love that method too. It's fun. It's like you're creating this, not synthetic's the wrong word, but you're creating this perfectly gridded, quantized beast. And that in itself is a feat, and it's fun and it sounds great, but it's not that other thing. Yeah. Yeah. And if I had to choose, I'd choose that other thing every time, that Motown thing. I am just fighting, trying to get this sun out of my face. I can't do anything. Beautiful. Thanks, pal. I'm just going to... No, that's even worse. I even planned for this, but clearly I didn't plan well enough. So let me just try and move forward a bit. Oh, you know what? Bathroom break. Let's do just a little bathroom break.
Oh, edit. I love it. Love it. Bathroom break.
And we're back. I figured out it was the reflection coming off my open door that was casting the light into me. We're back with less light, people. We were just talking about what you are probably best known for.
Wait a minute.
Okay.
Because we talked about the over editing of things and how nice it sounds, how great it sounds when everything is precise. But I think that even so, one thing that I always worry about is that people would associate my hatred of precise quantization as being anti-electronic music. And I think electronic music and hip hop especially can teach us a lot about why it matters to have swing, to have subtle timing inaccuracies, planned inaccuracies perhaps, that make something feel good. So hip hop was born from sampling, and they were sampling records from the 70s. And so, yeah, the 808s were on the beat, but the samples that filled the spaces in between often had elements, swing or swung elements and out of tune elements that helped it feel good. And then if you move into, house music that just is regimented and only on the beat, that doesn't have any swing, isn't what I think is successful in the grand scheme of things. Subtle groove shifts, quantization, manipulation, if you want to call it that, in the hi-hat track, in the, how late the sloppy claps are, in other elements, are what make electronic songs really resonate with people, I think. I mean, one of my favorite things to do helping young producers out when they're making electronic music is to be like, hey, what if you shifted those hi-hats by 10 milliseconds to the right? What if you, played with whether or not everything hit the beat exactly? And what if you just go and move this one that way and that one this way and move things around a little bit to give it some groove, some pocket, some swing? And I think, it's still the answer. It might not be humanity at that point. It might be your own manipulation of it, but having something that gives a push and pull within those 8 bars is super important. And totally subconscious agree. And makes people not understand why they love it so much.
Totally agree. That's great. I love that. What are you the most proud of in your music production accomplishments?
I think it's hard to separate. When you listen to a record that you worked on, that you did, it's hard to separate the feeling of the time and the experience of being in the studio from the actual quality of the recording.
Yeah.
That said, I think the Yukon Blonde record we did is probably what I'm most proud of. And a big part of that is because they're one of the bands that I helped go from little scrappy, ambitious and talented to more focused and well executed, while still having that I don't know, human groovy feel. This is a band, when they came to me, they hadn't even settled on that name, but they knew they wanted to make a record, and they had liked something I'd done previously that had a ton of harmonies. And they showed me the demo, and they were trying these harmonies, 3-part harmonies, and they weren't nailing it. They weren't really good enough to do what they wanted to do. And I said to them that I was pretty busy at that point, and I was like, I would love to work on this record, but you guys need to take vocal lessons. Like, what you're trying to do is amazing, and you have great ideas, and it will be awesome, but you need some help to get there. You need to do training. And at that point, they're pretty young. They're all long-haired dudes from Kelowna, and I didn't hear from them for a bit. And I thought, okay, well, I guess that's not happening. But then they came back, and they said, okay, we did it. I'm like, you did what? Well, we got vocal lessons. And they didn't just get vocal lessons. They went back to Kelowna and they went to a vocal coach and they said, we don't have much money, but we were told to get voice lessons. What can you do? And the vocal coach happened to run a men's choir, or I don't know if it was a men's choir, but a choir at a German Orthodox church. And she said to them, if you guys come sing in the choir at the German Orthodox church, I will give you vocal lessons for free. So like ripped jeans, long hair, bearded dirtbags committed that fall and winter to go to church, this Orthodox German church, and sing in the choir in exchange for free vocal lessons. They came back to me. I heard them singing. I'm like, yeah, okay, yes, I would love to make this record with you now. And it was awesome. It was really like, that showed their level of commitment to the project, to their craft, and they're great humans, great individuals, and the songs were awesome, and they were open. I knew they were open to outside input. We did pre-production. We worked on making choruses, and putting things where they belonged. And it was some of the most magical performances that we captured live off the floor as well. So that helped. And yeah, it's one of those things. They got signed after or around that time as well, and have done extraordinarily well. They're awesome.
Cool.
Also,
did they sing the harmonies together, or did they do it overdub? Did they overdub it?
That is a great question. They did some of them together, because that I'm not even sure they had played acoustic guitar at that point, and then it was like, okay, in order to nail these harmonies, we need to play acoustic and just sing them together.
Right. Cool.
So they did, and to be honest, they didn't have a ton of money, and a friend of mine, Sven, who brought them to me in the first place, wonderful engineer, and live sound human, and all around great person, was involved. And I knew to stretch the budget, like to get the most out of it, I had him doing, he was friends with the bands too. So I had him doing the overdub harmony sessions after we had sorted them all out. So I wasn't even there for it. I can't remember if they were singing them together or not. At that point, though, I think that was a time when I was enamored with how Queen had done their harmonies, where so if they did 3-part harmonies, they would have all three, and normally 3 of them would sing 3 different parts, but when tracking, they would get all 3 people to sing in unison the first part, and then they'd sing the second part in unison and the third part in unison. So you'd have 3 tracks that were 3 humans deep each. And I'm pretty sure that's how we approached it, because that's what I wanted.
That's cool. So they would sing the 3 notes of the chord. So they'd sing the root note all together in unison, then they'd sing the third or whatever it was in unison, and then the fifth or whatever after that. That's great.
Yeah. And that's the magic. Like if you do 2, you get bad. If the pitch is off, you get, but if you do 3, then it's all of a sudden nice chorusing. Mm-hmm. So if you triple track each harmony, I think at that point I was pushing to get them, we would double it. So it'd be, they do all 3 of them singing the first part twice, and then all 3 of them singing the second part twice, and all 3 of them singing the third part twice. So that effectively 18. We have 18 voices on 6 tracks doing the 3-part harmony.
Great. I love it. And then, this is a real musical learning thing, a music production learning thing. When you do that, the quality of those takes can literally, some of them can be at 35% and it will sound glorious.
I call it the smear campaign.
The smear campaign. Strength in numbers, man. Yeah. There's a couple of them that are out of tune. It's fine. Don't worry. It just makes it sound better, in my opinion.
Yeah. And then you send it to reverb, but then you put a chorus before the reverb, and you're like, oh, this is perfection.
Too easy. It's too easy. The next question comes from a dear friend of ours, from Tamara Edelman. She said, when you start your podcast, I want you to ask this question. So her question is, what has been your biggest career high and your biggest career challenge so far?
Well played, Tamara. My biggest career high. Wow, that's tough. I don't think my career isn't limited to music production, so I don't think I think I might have to go deep here. My biggest career high was that an old friend of mine approached me to ask me to work on a project that I ended up doing for 2 years straight, and that was recording testimony for the families in the National Inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. So I traveled all over Canada. I recorded hundreds and hundreds of hours of family testimony, recorded and live streamed from remote locations and cities, and it was the first time I felt like what I was doing was sacred and was like had the most impact of everything that I've done. And it took all of the knowledge and skills of what I had learned up to that point for me to do it well, from recording live sound, streaming, but also the empathy that I learned throughout my career in order to be able to help set, I'm handing microphone to someone who's about to tell their story about a missing or murdered family member for the first time in public in their lives. And I have one interaction with them to tell them how to speak into the microphone. Like that's, all of my training and experience up to that point put me in a place where I could try to help them feel as comfortable as possible stepping up to the microphone.
Right.
And it was devastating and very difficult, but I would say that's my career high.
Amazing.
It's probably my biggest challenge too, because it was eye-opening to say the least, and devastating. From a music production perspective, my biggest challenge would be helping a band understand why they need to be open to all possibilities if they want to put the best version of themselves on record. Continuous challenge, because they're working on their art that they've spent their whole lives nurturing, and it's so personal to them, as it should be. And in those situations, whenever, as a producer, I'm the one asking them to change, trying to convince them to do it differently and do it in a way that didn't come naturally to them, that's super, super difficult and challenging.
Great answers. Amazing. Describe your process when you produce music. Where do you start?
So I generally am producing bands or singer-songwriters, and where I start is by getting each member of the band or the singer-songwriter to make me a mixtape. So, initial discussions before we're even in the studio for pre-production, when we're talking about what kind of record we want to make, I will hear all of the words that they want to throw my way about what kind of record they want to make, but I also am super interested in what it is that makes them that inspires them. What, I tell them to make me a Spotify playlist at this point of 10 songs that they're in love with now, that make them feel something emotionally, that they like. I don't need make my snare drum sound like this, or I want the record to sound like this. It's not about examples for production. It's because in order for me to do my best with them, I need to meet them where they are, and I need to understand what's going on inside their heart and their brain. So that to me is the easiest way to get there, is to say, make me a mixtape. Let me hear what's inside your mind right now. What's rattling around? What are you listening to? What inspires you? What makes you happy? So that I can be in that world emotionally, while I think about how this record should be.
That's great. It's a good learning process for them too, because for them just to pick the songs to go on the mixtape, they've got to do some searching themselves and, think about what's important to them, what they love, crossed with what's applicable for what they're giving you, because they might love something that doesn't apply to what they're going to play to you, or does it? That they've got a decision to make, right?
But that's it. If it has like an impact on their soul, if you know what I mean, if it's important enough for them to, even if it's a totally different genre, it's a totally different era, then that's what I want to know. Like that's how I can get to know a human, is by hearing what affects them emotionally. So, and really, as a producer, what I need to do is understand what it's going to take to inspire them, or not inspire them, but to help them have the best performance of their life. So in order to do that, I do need to know what makes them tick.
One of the questions I have sort of in mind is, pick your favorite topic and give us 3 tips on that topic. So songwriting, mixing, drumming, singing. I'll let you answer that question, but I'd like to make a suggestion.
Yes.
Why don't you answer that question first? What would your topic be?
Probably pre-production, because I'm so in love with it.
I love it too.
So 3 tips.
Yeah.
Do pre-production first of all.
Great tip.
Amazingly, it's not something, I realize that it's not something that everybody does, and it just blows my mind.
Especially these days, especially if you're working on a laptop, the pre-production is the production. There's no test run. It
folds into it, yeah. Yeah, so do it. And then so often I'm doing stuff that is humans playing music, not in the box necessarily. So if it's a full band, then I'm getting the band in the pre-pro, in the rehearsal studio, and doing things. If it's a singer-songwriter, then I'm still doing pre-production, even though it is challenging, because I'm going to hire session musicians to play. And I always was like on the fence about this. Ooh, they're expensive. Like, how are they going to feel about, are they going to be okay with coming in for a rehearsal? Like, these are the top players in town. Are they going to scoff at this? But they love it. Of course they love it. Like, they want to sound good as well. So, they're like, oh yeah, cool, sweet. That sounds amazing. So bring everyone into the studio. I hit record on an iPhone. I don't care what I'm recording on at that point. And make sure that you go into pre-production saying, like, everything is on the table. We can do anything. You can try anything, any idea, not just any idea from me, but any idea from anyone else. It's like the boardroom brainstorming of music making. Because if you don't have that attitude going in, if you don't have everyone buying into that concept of just being able to try whatever, no risk free, then you're not going to be able to help them walk down certain paths that might give delightful results. So make sure everyone goes in with an open mind, I guess, if I were to distill that and a willingness to experiment into tip number 2 on pre-production. And I don't know, record that because it's amazing how many times, like when I'm in pre-production, I am concerned about 3 things. Song structure is a big one, of course. So we're going to work out usually with paper or whiteboard. I remember NAL Sound in North Van rehearsal studio. They had cheesy movie posters on the walls. And I would flip the movie poster over and pin it that way and then write the song structure down. So then eventually I got to the point where I would flip them back when I left, but I would get to the point where I'd be like, what room are we in? Ooh, I've already used all those movie posters. But yeah, write down. So song structure is a huge thing, but because I know that the first day of tracking is really about drums and bass, then I am, so I'm focusing on song structures so that we know that we have that the way we want, how many times we do in the chorus, how many bars into the breakdown. But then I am going to focus on drums and bass and the kick pattern and the bass and how they go together and try different beats. Mm-hmm. But recording it is so important because I made assumptions early on that we'd spend all this time, I'd work it out and be like, okay, yeah, that's amazing. We got it. And then I get to the studio and the drummer forgets what we talked about and the kick pattern's in the wrong spot. And I'm just like, it doesn't feel right. Are you sure this is what we were playing? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And sometimes they're kind of lying to you because they like the old version, but the old version is no good.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. I love it. So
what were you going to suggest then?
What I want to hear from you, and I just thought it would fit in there well, is I want to hear about your double drum tracking thing that I think you got from Motown too, but you do that a lot where you do 2 drum takes, right? So you can't just have 2 drummers going full on in one song at the same time. So how do you negotiate the parts and the sounds of those 2 drummers playing? Just describe that whole process because I love it.
Yeah. So it's I got it from Motown and jam bands like the Allman Brothers, for example. That was a moment when I first discovered I'm wearing headphones listening to the Allman Brothers as I went to sleep at one point, and I was like, wait a minute. There's a drummer here and a totally different drummer over here. In order to pull that off, they can't be playing the same thing. They can't be you'll have flams if they're just trying to play the same pattern. So when I do that, mostly, so the things that need to be different, they need to be different drum patterns for sure, but also they need to be totally different drum sounds. Otherwise, they're fighting for the same real estate frequency-wise and ambient-wise and everything else. So, best example would be on a couple of records where I would set up in a bigger studio a rock kit. Usual suspects, the normal way, miking too many mics. Ludicrously long tube sticking out of the kick drum with 6 mics on it or whatever, and normal stereo, everything for how things are supposed to sound. Sometimes with a PA beside it, just blaring kick, snare, and toms, which I would only do if the drummer, because if the drummer doesn't have the finesse to hit the cymbals quietly and the circles below them really loudly,
huge,
then you don't get what you need from that recording as much. So I have gone to the length, with a cymbal basher where I've set up a PA beside them and fed kick, snare, and toms live in the room while they're playing to get the room excited more by the drums and less by the cymbals. So the standard rock kit, and then I would do a dead kit, like a Motown kit. So I'd build a hut around a drum kit, and I would have them all set up at the same time. Hut around the drum kit with, baffles all around, baffles across the top, super dead tuning on the drums, wallet on the snare drum or whatever, just very meaty, poop, poop, nothing much going on, and usually a mono overhead kick snare, like just a mono kit that's really dead. And then a third option would often be, especially at this one particular studio, formerly Mushroom Studios, where they had reverb chambers, I would set up a big open kit in front of the reverb chamber, super compressed, really juicy, with like a kick drum beater that has like a sock and probably a towel wrapped around it. So it's just this big hunk of fabric that just goes boom.
Cool.
And then everything, the chamber is so compressed that basically they could play the snare drum with a chopstick and it would just go forever.
Describe for our listeners the chamber. What's a chamber?
Reverb chamber. In this case, there were two closets that were cinder block walls, freshly white painted, reflectively painted, that went up with ceilings about 20 feet high. So it's basically just a super reverberant closet. And, back in the day, all the classic Motown, there's chambers in the Capitol Records building in LA. That was the original way to get studio reverb. So normally you would have a speaker in the chamber and then a microphone that was maybe on a pulley that you could pull up further from the speaker in order to get different reverb times. I would just stick mics in the chamber and then have a big honkin' drum kit in front of the doors to record it like that. So in that case, in order to get more than one drum thing happening at the same time in the same space, we've got 3 totally different sounds. The Motown kit would probably be stuttered, fallen off my drum stools, drum fills, but in between spots. The chamber drums would just be super open, slow, half or quarter time kicks and snares that just went. And then the normal rock kit would be doing the normal rock thing, except if I were planning on this, I would just tell them not to do fills, not to do the things that the other drums were going to do.
It's great. Just play like Charlie Watts.
Yeah.
I love the chamber, the big explosive chamber sound. That's so great. What's your favorite part, starting or finishing productions?
Oh, those are my 2 favorite parts. It's the middle that I hate.
Me too.
Like overdubs can just go. I try to put so much work into pre-production that first day, the bed tracks, the big day of tracking, like most of the decisions have been made.
Yeah. Now
we're in the studio. It's about execution. I love that first day so much. I guess I like it more than mixing. So I will have to say that, because
me too.
By doing pre-production, you're not struggling with like, is this the right number of bars here? Should this part be that way? You've made all those decisions. So, I mean, for me, when I'm in the studio, it's like roll out, bring in, I tell the band, do you have a carpet that you like? Do you have a stuffy that means something to you? Do you have some like tapestries? Bring them. Bring all of that in. Let's turn the whole studio into your own space that makes you feel warm and welcome and like your jam space. Because I don't want you to think about the big red light on. I don't want you to think about me. I want you to think about the music. We've made the decisions. Now it's time to just execute. And so my job in that situation is to be the cheerleader, the taskmaster, to figure out, like, to know when we have it so that I can keep the ball rolling and say we're moving on, to help relieve them of that decision. Oh, was it good enough? I don't know. Should we do it again? I don't know. Are we good? So I'm the one. I'm like, we got it. That's amazing. That's awesome. And they're relieved and we're moving on, and everything, all the stress is taken away.
Yep.
But helping set the stage for them to all be super comfortable is huge. And it comes down to vibe and lighting and food. Like, I think it's as important for me to make sure catering's on the ball. And it's funny, I say catering like, oh yeah, every studio session has catering. No, they don't. But I make it happen because, like, the worst thing in the world is a guitar player who is hungry. Like, you, or anyone, you can't expect them to perform at their best if they have distractions, whatever those distractions may be. So, the runner's out, getting to the grocery store. We're getting like deli trays. I get them to chop things up. We do snack buffet style for them to graze all day long so that nobody's ever hungry and we never have to be like, I don't know, should we order food now? Right. Like, I think that's as important as everything else I do on that day of tracking.
That's so great. I love it. What advice do you have for up and coming music producers?
What could be general for any kind of producer? Well, trust your instincts would be a huge one. It's so hard when you're starting to be confident in your opinions, your ideas, your interpretation of what is good. The fact that you're going down the path to become a music producer means you care more and listen more than most people. And that probably means that your instincts are going to work to your benefit. It's just really hard to get over that initial insecurity of, I don't know, is this good? So believing that it is good, convincing yourself that your ideas are valid, that your opinion is sound, is a huge one. And then experimentation is everything. Don't do things the same way every time, because you can grow so much more with learning from happy accidents from experimenting, that it's crucial. And I know it's easy sometimes to fall into the like, oh, this thing works. I guess I'll just do it this way. I mean, and for me, I've to the point where, you know, those cards, the
oblique strategies.
Yeah, like I adopted those 15 years ago when I was feeling like I was doing the same thing too much. And I found out they existed and was like, oh, Paul Beckler bought the actual deck, because you can do, you know, there's online versions, there's an app. But that was huge, because anything to help me just change my perspective, to look at something in a different way, will breed the best results. Otherwise, I'll keep doing the same thing, and that's not exciting, innovative, or doesn't promote growth.
Right. Shout out Brian Eno, shout out Paul Beckler. What should we master, us up and coming music producers?
We should never master the music that we produce or mix.
I agree with that too. That's what we should not master.
It's like cutting your own hair. What should we master? It's hard because I come from the producing bands realm, and I think at this point that's not something that is happening as often. There are a lot of producers coming up who are going to be producing their own music. But I guess often they are looking for collaborators. Part of me wants to say master humility so that you don't suffer from putting too much emotional attachment in your ideas, so that when they do get tossed, whether it's by you or by someone else or by a realization, that that doesn't hurt your soul, throwing out the babies, like, you know, which means you just, knowing that you're always learning, knowing that making mistakes is part of the process. I mean, you don't see them as mistakes at that point. The other thing you should master, I think, is empathy, because it is truly, or emotional intelligence, but the best way to connect with someone, and if you want to make a great record for someone, with someone, then that means you have to connect with them on a pretty deep level. And the best way to do that is by being able to put yourself in their shoes, by being able to understand where they're coming from, by being able to empathize with the journey that they've had in their life to get them to this point, so that you can truly connect with them to help them achieve their best.
It's great. I love it so much. Is there an audio book or a book we should listen to or read?
It's funny, I'm looking up there because I have all my old books. And the one that really catches my attention is not Mixing with Your Mind, but the SAS Survival Handbook.
Mixing with Your Mind is so good.
Yeah, I might say, well, that's a dangerous one. I don't know.
Agree. That's the only thing.
Timing. It's
that's
about
the
timing.
only thing you've said that I don't agree with. No, I say give it to him day one.
We've had differing opinions on that since day one. Yeah, I don't really have a recommendation on that.
Let's go with Mixing with Your Mind. That's a good one because people don't know that. It's a really great book. It's kind of hard to get. It's by a guy named Stav.
You can get it from Australia. There's also a Carol
Dweck still available
book about mindset, which is pretty great. The growth mindset versus the whatever the other one is, which sucks.
Yeah, I have that on my Audible list today. The fixed mindset. Yeah, versus growth. It's called Mindset by Carol Dweck. Yeah, that's a great one. Okay, so I asked you to come up with an answer for my fast track question, and that is, name something you do extremely well and tell us how some simple steps we can take so that we can achieve greatness in that area too.
What my answer was what I had talked about setting the stage, setting the environment for the artist to achieve their best. So it's not, I mean, it doesn't have to just be about the bed track recording session, but any time that the artist is coming in to do their part, I mean, vocals especially, it's just so important. That performance is everything. The vocal performance is what's going to make or break the record. Whether, like, it doesn't matter how fancy and great your drum pattern is or how brilliant the arrangement is. If the vocal performance isn't earth-shattering, if it doesn't make people feel the emotions that the artist felt when writing the song, then I don't think it's going to move that many people. So now we're faced with the challenge of helping an artist, a singer, who has sung a song. If it's the first record you made with them, they might have, a singer-songwriter, first real record you're making, like, they probably have sung that song for a decade. Like, it's not out of the question that it might have been one of the first songs that they wrote that they love. So finding a way for it not to just be muscle memory, for it not to just be a performance that is technically correct, because I know how to sing this song, I know the words, I know the notes, I'm going to sing it the way that I've thought about singing it forever and the way that I have sung it forever. That kind of performance isn't necessarily going to be connecting to what inspired the artist to write the song in the first place. What inspired them to write those words in the first place. So we talked about lighting. We talked about, vibe, and that's still important when it's just the singer, of course, in the booth. And it's super tough. Like some people, I made a closet over in the corner, and you're going to get in the closet. You're going to stand up against this mic, and it's going to be black in there, and just sing it. And it's like, that's not really going to work. If you've got to pull them out and put them in the control room and throw some headphones on, if you've got to, I had very early on an artist that I worked with who was super self-conscious about her voice, not confident whatsoever. I took a baby monitor and I strapped it to the mic and had the other end of the baby monitor away from the mic in the studio, but I put a mic up to it so that I could feed that into her headphones so that she could hear a crunchy, distorted, cool sounding punk rock version of herself instead of a pristine, beautiful sounding version of herself so that she could just relax. Like, you're not scream at me, like, give me the raw. This was kind of a punky band, and I needed her to forget about the fact that we're recording and lean into the raw energy of what she's singing about. So whatever it takes. Often with songs that the easiest tricks is with songs that are emotional. Oh, I wrote the song about a girl, whatever, old girlfriend. What's she doing now? I don't know. It's not like there's no emotional attachment to them whatsoever. And now we need to find that emotion again before I have them sing it. That's exactly what I have to do. So in those situations, very often I feel like I'm going to get called out for this being the old bag of tricks. But, I've set it up. I've got the vibe. We had a good chat to kind of let them vent about life and how their day was and all that stuff on the studio couch before they went in. They're at the mic. We got Levels.
Shout out Levels.
And I will say, tell me, and I'll make sure I don't ask them this before this point in the process. In pre-production, I will not broach this subject. Tell me where you were when you wrote this song. I've got the lyrics. I've had them for weeks. I know what it's about. And it's dark in there. And they say, well, this is about a girl, and we had this thing going on. It was like 4 years ago. I lived in Coquitlam. Shout out Coquitlam. It went well, and then we broke, whatever the story is, right? But they basically, it's like the confession booth, right? They'll tell me the whole story, and when I feel like they've hit the end, I don't respond, I hit record. So they finish the story. They've put themselves where they were when they wrote the song, when they felt the emotions that inspired them to write the song, and then the intro plays, and then they sing.
That's great.
And it's worked extraordinarily well.
That's great. That's a power move. I love that. That's great. All right, let's end on that. Can you tell us where we can find out more about you?
This is the self-promotion part of the...
Yeah. Do you want us to go to your Instagram, to your website? What do you want? What do you want new fans of Doctorboss? Where do you want new fans of Doctorboss to go?
That's a good question. You can find at Doctorboss on Twitter, Instagram, Clubhouse, Green Room, all the things. I don't have a website. I don't actually promote myself. I work with the people I like so far. Everything's okay. I'm super busy. But I love talking about things, especially music. So, and audio. I guess those are the places.
That was
Instagram's
really great,
mostly like my kids, though. I'm like,
right.
It's tough.
Yeah.
It's public. It's fine. But it's like if you go to Instagram for fresh content from Doctorboss, you're going to be like, you see some woodworking and like, There's this kid again.
Thanks, man. That was great. That was awesome. I knew it would go over an hour, but I didn't think it would go this long. We'll see how long it ends up on the editing room floor.
Well, thanks for having me.
Anything else you'd like to add? Any last words of advice or any parting words?
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for doing this. I think it's really awesome that you're putting the work in to provide something that I know I've known you forever and I've taught with you forever, and to think that it's going to be, the middleman will be removed and it's going to be a direct line from you to the people who you can and will inspire so much is really awesome. And I will leave you with my favorite Futch quote, which is, options enslave, limitations liberate.
True.
Thank you for that.
Doctorboss.